we've got one team in. The Knicks have finished their sweep of the Cleveland Cavaliers. They'll be playing in the NBA Finals for the first time since 1999. But who are they going to face? Pivotal. Game 5 tonight. Spurs and Thunder. Let's talk about it. Big game breakdown. Teddy covers from WagerTalk.com, and we'll start looking at Game 5 by looking at the live odds screen, the Odds Logic live odds screen. And right now, I'm seeing mostly minus 4.5 out there for OKC. Total sitting in the 217 range, or a couple of 216.5s out there as we speak. And of course, whenever we're talking about the postseason, even in a series like this one, where injuries haven't been a huge factor per se, it's worth noting what the injury report looks like. Right now. San Antonio had the concerns about De'Aaron Fox and Dylan Harper. Both those two guys have healed as much as they're going to heal, I guess, at this stage. Whereas for the OKC side, the injuries are legitimately, and again, nothing insane for OKC, but we're talking about A.J. Mitchell and Jalen Williams. That's two impact players, two guys who have been good for them. Mitchell's officially ruled out. Williams is officially, as I speak, questionable for tonight. But the markets don't seem to think either one of those guys is going to suit up. That's why we've seen the adjustment. Remember, the first two games of this series, where it was San Antonio at OKC, what number we were looking at? I'll give you a hint. Was it 4.5 for these ball games? What we saw in games 1 and game 2 were as high as 7.5. And of course, game 2 being that high was influenced by the fact that the Spurs had won game 1. There was some zigzag there. There was a lot of OKC money. But again, we've seen where these lines were 6.5, 7, 7.5. Now we're looking at 4.5s. So one of the things I talked about at the start of the playoffs is that when a series is mispriced from the get-go, it's usually mispriced the whole way. Here, we're seeing a situation where the betting markets have reacted to what they've seen, and they've reacted to the injuries that we've got going tonight. And the 7.5s, as OKC is their base home line power rating or point spread, is now down to 4.5. So the markets have adjusted based on the injuries, and they've adjusted based on the fact that San Antonio has not been outclassed in this series. For extended stretches, the Spurs have been the better of these two teams. And we look at that in the series price right now with San Antonio, plus 140, plus 150, despite having to play two, in theory, of the last 3 games on the highway. The markets are giving Spurs respect now that they weren't getting at the start of the series. So that's worth noting when you're talking about not necessarily a shift in the wise guy mentality, but a thought process, both here in Vegas and in the global markets, that, San Antonio is not necessarily next year's team. They might be this year's team. Of course, OKC back at home tonight, and all the quotes coming out of the OKC locker room are, we need to say, certainly there's a lot of talk about starting better. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. They just punched us in our face early. 2 games in a row, they come out as aggressors. We just got to do a better job of starting the game. So there's certainly some urgency for OKC at the get-go. But of course, saying it and doing it are 2 different things, especially when you're a little bit shorthanded, and especially when you're going up against one of the, I'll give the Knicks some credit, one of the 3 most talented teams in the league right now. It's not like OKC is going up against a weakling here. The days of beating up weaklings, the Portlands of the world, they're gone now. So it's the other quote that's definitely worth it. And we have to talk about what Mitch Johnson did when it came to a defensive game plan. Remember, the Spurs led Game 3 15-0, and they lost by 15. They were down by 7 at halftime, despite that early lead. OKC really did a nice job of both handling the run and then bouncing back from it. What we saw in Game 4 for San Antonio was a legitimate defensive adjustment. They had been double-teaming Shea, forcing the ball out of his hands. In Game 4, that wasn't the case. They used more one-on-one looks against Gilgeous-Alexander, and then they prevented OKC from getting the open look from behind the arc. And what happened? Thunder, 33 three-point attempts. They made 6 of them. And that's why the game was a blowout, and that's why they scored in the 80s, and that's why San Antonio was in control. So what we saw was an adjustment from San Antonio on the defensive end that made all the difference for OKC on the offensive end. What can OKC to counter? Can OKC do to counter tonight? That's a good question. It's not like we expect the Thunder to be shooting 6 of 33 from three-point range very often. And when you talk about Shea going one-on-one, he only got to the free throw line 7 times. It was 6 of 15. And again, the fourth quarter of that game was all garbage time. It wasn't, it's as bad as OKC plays. When they shoot 33% from the floor, 6 of 33 from three-point range, and they got outscored on the free throw line as well. It was just a bad game. And, of course, the Spurs shot less than 40% as well in that contest. It wasn't like either team was lighting up the scoreboard. And, again, when you talk about 15 made three-pointers for both teams combined, 40 made free throws for both teams combined. That tells us, as we know very well, because they finished with 185 combined points, but it tells us very well that it was a poor offensive game for both squads. So what are we looking at for Game 5 tonight? Well, let me tell you. But before I do, I want to ask you guys one simple favor. If you like these videos, hit the like button. Thank you. It makes all the difference. Really does. The likes, the follows, the comments. I keep saying we're just shy of a 250,000. We're still just shy of 250,000. If you haven't follow. Get instant alerts when these videos go live. Lots of good content, free content every day on Wager Talk TV. Like, comment, follow. Thank you. And of course, it is $5 Tuesday at wagertalk.com. $5 best bets from every capper, myself included. We're locked and loaded in the NBA for tonight. Check it out. Again, wt.buzz/TC is my homepage. wagertalk.com is the website. There, we've taken care of business. Now, let's talk about what we expect to see tonight from San Antonio and OKC. And this quote, I read some of the quotes from Shea earlier. This quote really stood out to me from Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. Again, we're coming off a game in which both teams were pretty lousy on the offensive end, especially from three-point range, where the second half and much of especially the fourth quarter was played at a snail's pace compared to what we expect because it was such a blowout. The quote from Shea. They have multiple guys who are tenacious. They get into the ball. They have Wemby behind them. They know that. So they do that to their strength. So obviously a really good defense. To score on them, it's going to take quick decisions and the right decisions. You got to be good offensively and really sound. Quick decisions. That's the quote that stands out to me. So we're coming off a game in which both teams shot poorly. Neither team even hit 40% from the floor. Coming off a game in which both teams shot from three-point range very poorly. 9 and 6 makes from two teams that, in any given game, either one of them could hit 15, plus the three-pointers. And OKC is openly talking about, hey, we have to move faster on offense. We have to make quicker decisions. Not necessarily playing hurry up, but we got to move the ball and we got to get to the hole. And when you're going up against a guy like Wemby, normally, as these series progress, all right, you don't expect higher scoring games. You're looking for little unders in Game 5s and Game 6s, and they tend to, they have a tendency, when we talk about the long-term trends, to, as the longer the series progresses, Games 5, Game 6s, Game 7, they're not up and down, up and down, up and down affairs. And yet, when we see the quotes from OKC, when we see the fact that this total has been bet up at the wise guy books, I'm expecting pace tonight. I really am. And that says, to me, if you're going to get involved with the total, get up and over the number. Again, 216.5. You can still find 217, the prevailing number, again, in that Odds Logic live odds stream. But DK's got his 216.5 right now. So does FanDuel. So there's plenty of 216.5s out there. And, of course, it's always better not to pay for that half point. That's the beauty of the Odds Logic live odds screen. If you see where the number is, you know where I can bet it right now. So, again, oddslogic.com/Teddy for a free 7-day trial. If you're interested, check it out right now. And, of course, if you're interested in $5 Tuesday, check out wagertalk.com right now. If you're interested in the NBA, thanks for watching my video. We'll do another one for Game 6. Best of luck with all your bets. And thanks for watching Wager Talk TV. Cheers.